A West African military alliance just trapped thousands of insurgents in one of Africa's most strategic strongholds, and the Western world barely noticed. The Siege of Kidal isn't just a battle over territory. It's a geopolitical earthquake that's reshaping the entire Sahel region, exposing a decades-old system of control built on corruption, resource theft, and puppet governments that few people understand exists at all. This is the story of how Ibrahim Traoré and the AES alliance turned Africa's oldest colonial wound into ground zero for a new world order, and why what happens in the next few months could fundamentally alter the balance of power on an entire continent. To understand what's happening in Kidal right now, you need to understand what Kidal represents. It's not just a city in northern Mali, it's a fortress. For decades, it has been the stronghold of the Tuareg rebel movement, a symbol of resistance against Bamako's central government. But Kidal is more than symbolic. It sits at the intersection of some of the world's most valuable resources: gold, uranium, strategic minerals, and strategic positioning along migration and trafficking routes that funnel billions of dollars through the Sahel every single year. When Ibrahim Traoré and his AES alliance, a coalition of military governments from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, decided to encircle Kidal, they weren't just making a military move. They were drawing a line in the sand. They were saying, "This is ours now." And more importantly, they were saying, "We are no longer asking permission from the powers that have controlled us for centuries." But here's where the story gets darker. The Tuareg rebels holding Kidal aren't fighting alone. They never were. For years, this rebel movement has been bankrolled, armed, and coordinated by external powers. Powers with names you might recognize and powers operating in the shadows. And the money flowing into their coffers is staggering. We're talking about billions of CFA francs, billions funneled through networks of corruption, gold trafficking, and international conspiracies that stretch from the Sahara all the way to boardrooms in Paris, Washington, and beyond. The AES alliance knows this, and that's why they're tightening the noose around Kidal. Because they've discovered something that changes everything. The rebels aren't just fighting for Tuareg independence. They've become tools. Proxies in a larger game where foreign powers use insurgency to destabilize regions, control resources, and maintain the colonial-era extractive systems that have kept Africa dependent and poor for over a century and a half. Let's rewind for a moment. Mali's government has been in chaos for years. In 2020, a military coup toppled the civilian president. Then, another coup followed. The political system that Western powers had spent decades building, one that kept Mali compliant, predictable, and profitable for foreign interests, started cracking. Young military officers took control. They wanted change, real change, not the performative democracy that masked neo-colonialism. One of those officers was Ibrahim Traoré. In 2022, he led a coup that brought him to power in Burkina Faso. Unlike the traditional West African strongman, Traoré was different. He didn't just talk about sovereignty, he acted on it. He kicked out French military forces. He seized control of the country's gold and resources. He began consolidating power across the Sahel. And he formed the AES alliance with Mali and Niger, three countries saying at the same time to their former colonial masters and new imperial overlords, "We want out." This is the crucial context. What's happening in Kidal isn't an isolated military conflict. It's a manifestation of something much larger. Africa's attempt to break free from the systems that have extracted its wealth for centuries. The Sahel military governments under Traoré's leadership represent something genuinely new. A willingness to use force, nationalist rhetoric, and coordinated action to reclaim sovereignty over natural resources and political independence. But they had a problem. And that problem was Kidal. The Tuareg rebellion in northern Mali has deep historical roots. The Tuareg are a nomadic ethnic group spread across Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Algeria. For decades, they've fought for autonomy or independence, citing historical discrimination and marginalization by central governments. Their cause resonated. International human rights organizations championed it. Western governments nodded sympathetically while doing very little. But something changed. The rebels in Kidal increasingly aligned themselves with extremist groups, specifically JNIM, an al-Qaeda-affiliated militant organization. This wasn't accidental, and this is crucial. When the Tuareg rebels made this alliance, they lost something invaluable. They lost their moral authority. They lost the ability to claim they were fighting for freedom and self-determination when they were now fighting alongside groups designated as terrorist organizations by the international community. The AES alliance understood this immediately. By encircling Kidal and applying military pressure, they weren't just fighting insurgents. They were fighting a movement that had already delegitimized itself in the eyes of the international community. The rebels had chosen extremism over independence, and that choice would haunt them. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Because the rebels holding Kidal didn't just wake up one day and decide to align with JNIM. That alignment was facilitated, encouraged, funded. By whom? Let's follow the money. Billions of CFA francs flow through the Sahel every year. Some of it is official development aid. Some of it is defense spending. But a massive amount of it is untraceable. It moves through gold smuggling networks, trafficking routes, and offshore accounts. It funds insurgencies, pays off military commanders, and ensures that instability persists, because instability is profitable for certain actors. The rebels in Kidal have been receiving coordinated funding and weapons from sources that benefit from Mali's destabilization. Foreign intelligence agencies have interests in keeping the Sahel fragmented and dependent. Resource extraction companies have interests in regions where governments are weak and compliant. Weapons manufacturers have interests in perpetual conflict. And the old colonial powers, particularly France, have interests in maintaining influence over regions that were once their direct colonial possessions and remain economically dependent on their currency, the CFA franc. When you trace the money backing the Tuareg rebels, you find fingerprints everywhere. Intelligence support from external actors, arms smuggling networks that cross borders from Algeria and Libya, gold trafficking schemes that convert stolen minerals into cash in offshore havens. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented reality that journalists, human rights organizations, and intelligence analysts have reported for years. The difference now is that the AES alliance has decided to end it. By encircling Kidal, the AES isn't just fighting a rebel group. They're confronting the entire system of external interference that has kept the Sahel destabilized and extractable. They're saying, we control our territory now. We control our resources now. And we will not tolerate foreign-backed insurgencies operating on our soil. The siege itself is strategically brilliant. Kidal is a walled city, relatively small but strategically positioned. The AES alliance has encircled it, cutting off supply lines and preventing reinforcements. The rebel fighters inside are now trapped. They have limited supplies, dwindling ammunition, and a shrinking window before they either surrender or face military assault. Psychologically, this is devastating for the insurgency. For decades, the Tuareg rebels have portrayed themselves as a liberation movement, David against the Goliath of the Malian state. But now they're besieged. They're losing territory. Their international backing is becoming untenable because of their alignment with terrorist groups. And the new military governments in the Sahel have unified in a way that previous civilian governments never could or would. The rebels in Kidal face an impossible situation. If they fight, they face military defeat. If they surrender, they face prosecution for terrorism and collaboration with JNIM. Their only hope is external intervention, military support, or diplomatic pressure from foreign powers. But those powers are increasingly hesitant to openly support a movement that has aligned itself with al-Qaeda affiliates. The reputational cost is too high. Here's what's really happening. The rebels are being defeated not just militarily, but politically. Their claim to legitimacy, that they represent the will of the Tuareg people, has been shattered by their choice to align with extremists. The AES understands this. They're using it. They're tightening pressure while the international community watches, unable or unwilling to intervene on behalf of a movement that has burned its bridges with the international order. But the suffering is real, and this is crucial to understand. While the geopolitical chess game plays out at the highest levels, ordinary people are paying the price. Kidal's civilians are caught between the siege and the rebels holding their city. They're facing shortages of food, medicine, and basic supplies. They're experiencing the violence and displacement that always accompanies conflict. The AES alliance doesn't publicize this suffering. International media, which could highlight it, remains largely indifferent because the narrative doesn't fit neatly into Western frameworks of good versus evil. The rebels are portrayed as terrorists or separatists depending on who's speaking. The AES alliance governments are portrayed as authoritarian or corrupt. Both characterizations contain truth, but neither captures the full complexity. What's actually happening is more fundamental. A new generation of African leaders is using military force and nationalist ideology to attempt something that African nations have struggled to achieve since independence: genuine sovereignty over their own territories and resources. This is destabilizing, it's violent, and it's causing real human suffering. But it's also a genuine challenge to systems of control that have persisted for centuries. The civilians in Kidal are victims of history, victims of colonialism, victims of post-colonial corruption, victims of geopolitical competition, and victims of a conflict they didn't create and can't control. Their suffering is real, and it matters. Even as we understand the larger historical and geopolitical forces at play, we must not forget that behind every military strategy, every siege, every cut supply line, there are human beings whose lives are being destroyed. Now let's talk about what this means for the broader Sahel region and for Africa as a whole. The Sahel is Africa's most strategically important zone right now. It's where resources are concentrated: gold, uranium, rare earth minerals. It's where migration flows and trafficking networks converge. It's where terrorist groups operate. And increasingly, it's where geopolitical competition is intensifying between Western powers trying to maintain influence and emerging powers like Russia and China trying to expand theirs. The AES alliance's control of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger means they control vast territory and enormous natural resources. If they can consolidate power, stabilize these regions, and maintain unified action, they could reshape the entire balance of power in West Africa. They could become an independent force on the continental stage, no longer beholden to former colonial powers or international institutions dominated by Western interests. This terrifies certain actors. France, which spent over a century controlling Mali and still maintains significant economic interest there, has watched as French soldiers were expelled and French influence has evaporated. The United States, which sees the Sahel as crucial to its counter-terrorism strategy and great power competition with China and Russia, watches nervously as American influence wanes. International institutions like the World Bank and IMF, which have leveraged debt and conditional lending to maintain control over African economies, find themselves dealing with governments that are increasingly willing to ignore their prescriptions. The siege of Kidal is a symbol of this shift. It shows that the new African governments in the Sahel can act decisively, can defeat insurgencies backed by external powers, and can consolidate control over their territories. It shows that the old system, where African governments served external masters while claiming sovereignty, is breaking down. But it also shows the costs and risks of this transition. The risks are significant. Military governments, by definition, concentrate power. They reduce accountability. They increase the potential for authoritarianism. The AES alliance governments have shut down critical media, suppressed dissent, and used nationalist rhetoric to justify restrictions on freedom. They've also made deals with Russia, inviting Wagner mercenaries into Mali and Burkina Faso, which suggests they're willing to trade one form of external dependence for another. This is complicated, because on one hand, the AES alliance is fighting for genuine independence from Western control. On the other hand, they might be replacing Western control with Russian or Chinese control. They might be trading one imperial arrangement for another. But there's a crucial difference. And this is why the siege of Kidal matters so much. Western imperial control of Africa was built on structural dependency. on debt, on currency control through the CFA franc, on resource extraction under the guise of development partnerships, on installation of compliant civilian governments that would do Western bidding while maintaining the appearance of democracy. This system has been extraordinarily effective. It's allowed Western powers to extract Africa's wealth while claiming to help Africa develop. What the AES alliance is attempting is different. They're using military force to seize control of their territories and resources directly. They're kicking out Western militaries. They're challenging the international institutions that enforce Western economic dominance. They're willing to work with Russia and China, but on terms more favorable to African interests than what they were getting from the West. Is this perfect? No, but it's a genuine challenge to a system that has been catastrophically exploitative. And the gold trafficking angle is crucial to understanding what's really at stake. Mali and Burkina Faso are among Africa's largest gold producers. Gold is extremely valuable, highly portable, and easy to smuggle across borders and launder through international markets. For decades, enormous quantities of African gold have been smuggled out of the continent, with the profits going to corrupt officials, foreign traffickers, and international crime networks. The AES alliance has made controlling this gold a priority. They want to ensure that the gold extracted from their territory stays under their control and generates revenue for their governments rather than enriching smugglers and foreign actors. This is why they're tightening their grip on Kidal. The region contains valuable gold deposits. Controlling it means controlling the resource flows. The rebels in Kidal, by contrast, have benefited from the chaos surrounding gold trafficking. The fragmentation of Mali's territory has allowed smuggling networks to operate with impunity. The instability has meant that no government could effectively regulate and tax gold extraction. From a certain perspective, the rebels have had incentives to maintain instability because instability has been profitable. The AES alliance is attempting to end that. They're saying, the gold belongs to our nations. The profits from our resources will benefit our people, not foreign smugglers and international crime networks. This is also a direct challenge to international actors who have benefited from the chaos. Intelligence agencies that use gold trafficking for covert funding, private military companies that profit from instability, and international businesses that exploit Africa's resources while paying minimal taxes. So what happens next? The siege of Kidal is likely to end in one of several ways. The rebels could surrender, facing prosecution, but at least preserving their lives. They could attempt to break out, likely resulting in military defeat and mass casualties. Foreign powers could attempt to negotiate a settlement, pressuring the AES alliance to accept a ceasefire and power-sharing arrangement. Or the AES could push through with a full military assault, destroying the insurgency decisively, but at significant human cost. Whatever happens militarily, the larger pattern is clear. The AES alliance is consolidating power. They're demonstrating that they can defeat insurgencies backed by external powers. They're showing that Africa has military and political leaders willing to challenge the international order. And they're making moves toward genuine control of their territories and resources. This will have global consequences. If the AES alliance can stabilize the Sahel, consolidate power, and prevent Western or Russian recolonization, they represent a genuine realignment of global power. They represent the possibility of an Africa that is genuinely independent, that controls its own resources, that makes its own foreign policy decisions, and that refuses to be subordinate to external powers. But if they fail, if they're undermined by international pressure, or if they fall into authoritarianism, or if they simply lack the capacity to govern effectively, then the Sahel could become a battleground for great power competition, with Africa's people caught in the middle. The siege of Kidal is thus far more than a military operation. It's a flashpoint in a larger struggle over who gets to control Africa's future. It's a confrontation between a new generation of African leaders determined to seize sovereignty and the international systems that have profited from African dependency. It's a test of whether genuine independence is possible or whether Africa will simply trade one form of external control for another. The rebels trapped in Kidal made their choices. They aligned with extremists. They became tools of external powers. They lost legitimacy, and now they're paying the price. But their defeat doesn't mean the struggle for African sovereignty is over. It might mean it's just beginning. As you watch the news in the coming weeks and months, as the siege of Kidal unfolds, think about what's really at stake. Think about the history that's being made. Think about the ordinary people caught between competing powers. Think about what genuine African independence would look like and what obstacles stand in the way. Because the siege of Kidal isn't just about a fortress in Mali. It's about whether Africa will finally break free from the systems that have controlled it, exploited it, and kept it subordinate for centuries. It's about whether a new world order is possible. And it's about whether the next generation will inherit a continent that's finally its own, or whether they'll inherit a continent still divided, still dependent, still exploited by those with power. The answer is being written right now, in the dust of Kidal, in the decisions of Ibrahim Traoré and the AES alliance, in the resistance of rebels trapped in a city with no way out, in the silence of an international community that can't quite decide whose side to support when the lines between good and evil have become so blurred that they're almost invisible. This is the Sahel in 2024. This is Africa's hidden war for sovereignty, and the world is barely watching.